Welcome to this Phi Beta Mu Legacy Project interview. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame member, John Bradley. John, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. It's an honor to be asked to be in this legacy project, and I appreciate you and all the others who have worked so much on this. Thank you so much.
Well, and we appreciate all that you've done for bands and band music over many, many years. So take us back to the very beginning. How did you get started in band to start with, back as a youngster?
Okay, well, I'm from Monroeville, Alabama. If you don't know, if people don't know where Monroeville is, if they've ever seen or read the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Harper Lee was from Monroeville and was my across the street neighbor. So I knew her and all her family. And people sometimes say, well, what was Monroeville close to? And I say, well, it's not close to anything, but it's about halfway between Montgomery and Mobile. But anyway, I grew up in Monroeville, Alabama. I come from a musical family. My mother played the piano. She could play anything by ear. It was just amazing what she could do. And my dad was a trumpet player. He played trumpet in the Auburn University band. Back then it was Alabama Polytechnic Institute, BPI. And then when he got out of college, he had his own dance band. He played trumpet. And so he started me on trumpet. I think I was in the fourth grade. He bought me a little silver cornet. And I remember, I wish I still had it, but it had a little adjustment screw on the first valve slide. You could adjust the slide in and out. And he taught me the C scale. I'm sure I played other things, but I remember that he wrote it out, wrote the fingerings in for me. And so that's how I got started on trumpet. And then when I was in the fifth grade, we started band in the fifth grade. And he traded that cornet in on a Holton trumpet. I don't remember the model or anything, but it was a Holton trumpet. And I had a director named R.N. Kellogg. And I had him for a year in the fifth grade. And then in the sixth grade, before I went into the sixth grade, they hired a new director named Don Jackson. Now, Don was his first job was at Fort Deposit, Alabama, which is just south of Montgomery. I don't think there's even a school there anymore, but I understand he had some really good bands there while he was there. But he was 25 years old when he came to Monroeville, and he never left. He stayed there the rest of his life. But he would come over to the elementary school in the mornings, and we had band in the lunchroom. And I remember we didn't have any percussion equipment, and the kid that was the drummer kept time on the table with a salt shaker. So,
okay.
But yeah, and the band was very small back then, high school band. So in the sixth graders, we marched with the high school band. And that's when I first really kind of got where I thought I might want to get into music. I looked forward to Friday night football games, being able to march with the band. It was just a great thing for me. And Don was he was a great director. He was just absolutely great. Kind of old school, but we really liked him. Yeah. And when I got into the seventh grade, our school was 7 through 12, all in one building. So we had band twice a day. And when I had band, he would teach us private lessons. Everybody would practice that you go into his office and he give you a private lesson. And he taught me into trying out for All-State in the seventh grade. Now, back then, there was no middle school All-State.
Oh, yeah.
You probably remember that.
Oh, very well. You're trying out with the big boys.
He tried out against high school kids.
Yeah.
I learned my scales. And back then, trumpet tryout was out of the Arbin book. You had eighth note exercises, 16th note triplet, syncopation, 6/8, and a solo. And of course, if you had no chance of making it in the seventh grade, but it was a good experience. Um, and so my older brother was a tenor sax player, and that year he was a senior, and he made All-State. In fact, he made Red Band. He was fourth chair in Red Band. But in our district, which included Mobile and Baldwin County, Fairhope bands, and Mobile bands were really good. And we had 3 bands in our district after All-State after All-State tryouts, Red, White, and Blue. And my brother was in the Red Band. And Colonel Carlton K. Butler directed the Red Band that year. And that was I'd always heard of him, but I'd never seen him before or watched him work. And I remember they played Deflator Mouse. They learned Deflator Mouse in 3 rehearsals. And he was just bigger than life to me, you know. And but I thought that making a Red Band was just the greatest thing in the world. My brother talked about how great it was. And so I kind of set my goal to make All-State. And in the 8th grade, I tried out again and didn't make it again, of course. And so I decided that in the 9th grade, I probably decided I needed to take some lessons. And my dad had traded that Holton trumpet in on a box Stradivarius. Paid $300 for it. It was a Mount Vernon Bach, and I still have that trumpet to this day, and I still play it most every day. And I've tried other trumpets over the years, but nothing plays like that trumpet. So that was a $300 well worth what he paid.
That's a wonderful investment.
I think they're about 3,000 now. So, but anyway, I started taking lessons from Tom Borden. Tom had graduated from Alabama, first trumpet there, and he was at Dothan Junior High. And so I drove 150 miles once a month and took lessons from Tom. And he really taught me a lot. And then when Dr. Long left Robert E. Lee in Montgomery, Tom got the job at Robert E. Lee, and he had gone to high school there, I think. And so I drove 100 miles every month to Montgomery to take lessons from Tom. So 9th grade, they take 6 trumpets from the district. I was the 6th trumpet, so I made the blue band in 9th grade, and I thought that was great. And I set my goal then to make Red Band. And in the 10th grade, I made Red Band. I was first chair in the district, beat out some high school players from Mobile, and made Red Band 10th and 11th and 12th grades. And I got to play under Paul Yoder. I remember playing Les Preludes by Franz Liszt with Paul Yoder. And then one year we had Leonard Smith, who directed the band, great trumpet player. And in my senior year, William Ravelli was scheduled to direct the Red Band, and he got sick right before All-State, and Colonel Butler filled in for him. And so I got to play under Colonel Butler, and I had been to University of Alabama music camp 2 or 3 times during my high school career, and played under Colonel Butler. And to just give you an idea of the difference how it is now and back then, it was a 2-week music camp. You got room and board, private lessons for $40.
Times have certainly changed.
But and by then I had pretty much made up my mind that I wanted to go into music ed. And so being under Don Jackson helped a lot. Don really encouraged me too, and he taught. He was just, as I said, such a great teacher, and he had so many great ways of teaching. I know, like in the summer, our old band room was an old cement block building, and it was not air conditioned, of course, and they heated it in the winter with a pot-bellied stove. That's how old it was. But in the summer, we had band twice a week. And we sat out under a shade tree, and he had these books of R.B. Hall marches. And we sat and we played those marches till our tongues hung out. And that was Don's method of teaching. You just played it and you played it and you played it. But we actually used those marches on the field, did drills to them. They were really hard. But anyway, I went on to the University of Alabama and played in the $1 Million Band. I played in the orchestra, brass ensemble, and Colonel Butler, of course, was there then. And Colonel was my first year there. He was kind of hard on me, you know, and I kept thinking, well, you know, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but he just kind of stayed with me all the time. And finally, after about a year, I realized that he wasn't going to let me settle for mediocrity. You know, I think he saw that I could do this, and he was going to make sure I did it and did it right. And I noticed some of the other people, he just didn't pay much attention to them. So I've always thanked him for that, you know. And then also, his assistant was Yale Ellis, as you know.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, what a great teacher. And he was a low brass teacher then. And I had a brass class under him, and he taught us so many things about what we needed to do to be able to teach band. For instance, I know one time he told us the next class to meet him outside. He told us where to meet. We got out there, he had a sousaphone sitting on some newspaper, a metal sousaphone. He had a box of baking soda and a brush and a hose. And he showed us how to clean a sousaphone with baking soda. It's just things like that, you know, that you wouldn't know if you didn't, somebody didn't show you how to do it. And, but Mr. Ellis and I still have his notebook and Colonel's notebook from their woodwind and brass classes that I've kept over the years. And I just go back and refer to them occasionally, you know, just remember things that they told us. And so I finished school there at Alabama, and my first job was at a little school down in Monroe County. I finished in the middle of the year, and I finished up. They didn't have a band director there, so I finished up that year. And then I got a job in Selma, Alabama, teaching with Rush Gavin. I had West Side Junior High.
West Side.
And but right about that time, it was during the Vietnam War. And so everybody was getting drafted. I was 21 years old. I had already had my physical, my pre-induction physical. And the lady at the draft board told me that the next meeting I was going to be drafted. And I was lucky enough to get into the 151st National Guard Band in Montgomery. And I stayed in there for 5 years, played trumpet, and I stayed in Selma for 2 years and then moved to the Birmingham area and taught at Mountain Brook, and I taught several years at Hueytown High School. And when I got to Birmingham, I got tired of that drive to Montgomery, so I transferred to the 313th Army Band in Birmingham and stayed in that band for 31 years. So I did 36 years all total between National Guard and Army Reserves. And the last, we had a first sergeant named Blund Bell, and Blund died suddenly. And I got promoted to first sergeant, and I did that for 12 years until I was forcibly retired at my age. But anyway, I did several years in Birmingham, and I got out of teaching. I was a little burned out, and I got out of teaching for a year. And my former principal I had in high school, and he had been the football coach before that, he offered me a job to come back to Monroeville and teach at my old high school. And I took the job, so I kind of went full circle.
Full circle, yes.
Yeah, and Don Jackson was still there, and Don wanted to get moved to the junior high, and I was going to take the high school, and so we decided we would work both schools together. And we did the junior high in the morning, the high school in the afternoon, and it was just a new learning experience being around him every day because he was such a great teacher. And we had a great time working together. And sadly, he passed on a few years ago. And anyway, I stayed in Monroeville for 28 years. And during that time, I had gone back. My wife and my principal encouraged me to go back to Alabama State part-time and get an administration degree. And so I did that and didn't really want to, but I did. And during that time also, I was elected president of Alabama Bandmasters Association.
Remember that, yeah.
1995, I was
Mhm.
president of ABA. But my last 8 years in Monroeville, they kind of talked me into taking an administrative job. I was an assistant principal at the middle school. And I really enjoyed that, but I missed the band directing. And my superintendent at that time was a former student. So he made me the band supervisor for the county. So I went around and helped the band directors any way I could, and they could call
Yeah.
on me for advice. And I enjoyed doing that too. But I retired after 28 years in Monroeville. And my wife and I moved to the Birmingham area to be close to my daughter and her family and the grandchildren. And I worked 4 years over at Briarwood Christian School with my good friend Jim Knight, just part-time. Then Jim retired and we went to Homewood. Both of us went to Homewood along with Jim Duran. And I stayed there at the middle school for 11 years, part-time, and just absolutely loved working there. And I retired from that, and I'm retired now. So that's about it as far as how I became a band director.
That is amazing. Now, and of course, you still play
I
and
do.
play extremely well.
Thank you.
I have heard so many people talk about you and Harry McAfee in the Alabama Winds and how fabulous that is coming from the trumpet section.
Well, thank you.
So
Harry and I played in the 313th Army Band. That's how I first got to know Harry.
wow,
And we
I did.
sat by each other for about 40 years. I joke all the time. I said, I know what Harry's going to do before he knows he's going to do it. We sat by. But yeah, I do a lot of playing, and I still play that same Bach trumpet that my dad bought for $300 years ago. But yeah, Harry and I play a lot here in Birmingham, other than Alabama Winds.
Yeah, that is amazing. Of course, and Monroe County High School was not exactly a gargantuan school at all. For those folks that are out there who are in a fairly small town, fairly small school, what words of wisdom, words of advice would you give as far as building and sustaining a band program? How do you do it in a small place?
Well, I'll give one example of something I did when I went to Monroeville. I was at the junior high in the morning, and I wanted to find something in that school that needed to be done that nobody wanted to do. And I found out that it was the school store in the morning. Nobody wanted to work the school store. So I volunteered to do it. The teachers loved me because I would do it and they didn't have to. And the principal was glad because he needed somebody. But I had a method to my madness. I recruited when kids came through the school store. And we got, we got to where we were starting like 100 kids at that school. Probably maybe 500 kids in the school, 6 through 8. So, and then that went over to the high school. We retained a lot of those kids at the high school, which is we had about 500 kids there too. And at one point we were up to like 160 in the band of a school of 500.
Yeah. So 20% of over 20% of the school in the band. Yeah.
It just got to be the band was the thing to do, but there are things like that, and it helps to have a really good administrator, which we did. And I tell young directors, and everybody really, you know, your administrator can be your best friend as far as getting the program going.
Uh-huh.
And something I did every so often, I would go by the office and I would just ask my principal, is there anything I can help you with? And usually he'd say no, but thank you, you know. But he appreciated that that I offered to do it. And so when I needed something, you know, he was on my side. So that's something that really really helps. But you know, just to be a team player with your
Uh-huh.
school. Don't get down in your band room in your own little domain there and say I'm not having anything to do with anything else. You know, do the things that the other teachers do. They have to do, like you know, hall duty and bus duty and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you talked about how much the private lessons had helped you. That you know that you came through a program where your band director was doing basically private lessons for everybody in the program, and then you took lessons.
Right.
Were you able, as once you became a band director, of course, you know, in Monroeville, not a lot, I assume not a lot of private teachers in the area. Um, what did you do to build the individual musicianship? Were you able to do private lessons or somehow do it through group lessons?
Well, we had two directors there at one time, so we could pull kids out. One
Okay.
director pull kids out, you know, either individually or a small group. And we had an extra room, which had been the choir room right behind the band room, and we didn't have a
Yeah.
choir, so we got to use that room. We could pull kids out for private lessons or private, you know, ensembles, and the other director could do the band at the same time. So that really helped us a lot as far as getting kids, um, you know, with a good start on their instrument. And something else, now, talking about the administrator, uh, the principal we had at Monroeville Junior High, the parents had to sign a contract when their kids signed up for beginning band with the understanding that they would not get out for that whole year. They could not get out, and he wouldn't let them
Mhm.
out. And you know, the kids stayed and they learned to play, so we kept a lot of them that way.
Mhm.
Don't see
Yeah.
that very places.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that, yeah, that reminds me of my first principal who,
Mhm.
and whether it was band or it didn't matter what it was, there was the rule that there were no scheduled changes after June the 1st.
Right,
So you could choose whatever elective you wanted. And if you changed your mind, that was fine, as long as you did it before June 1st for the next year.
right,
But after that, it was set in stone, you know, and there were so many kids, there's a little bump in the road, or they get mad at you or their mama or the kid sitting next to them, and I want to quit. Well,
right,
they couldn't quit. And then a
right.
week later, they were fine. And then they signed up for band the next year, and went all the way through high school. So
Right.
I think that is so important. And and I agree with you. Having a good administrator, my goodness, it is all the difference in the world. And I like what you said about the way that you kind of fostered that relationship. You know, that when the principal sees you coming, it's somebody who's willing to help,
Hmm.
say something good, rather than only coming when there's a problem or
Right,
something to complain about.
right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, um, you, of course, Colonel Butler and Yale Ellis. Any other good story? Because I mean, those are two icons right there. And of course, I grew up hearing about Colonel Butler. My uncle went through the University of Alabama, and Colonel Butler was the only band director he had. Tuscaloosa Junior High, Tuscaloosa High School, and the University of Alabama. Because at one time, Colonel had all three of those.
Right, yeah. You know,
So
I sat down the other day and listened to Colonel Butler's recording on this, what we're doing now. And
yes, yeah.
it's really, really interesting how everything he did. You know, he started out at Ramsey High School in Birmingham.
Mhm.
And
Very fine band there. Mhm.
and Mr. Ellis was at Woodlawn. And Colonel said that he had a parent at Ramsey who kind of got to be good friends with, and told him, I think the band director's name at Alabama was Captain Turner. They called him Captain Turner. And this parent told Colonel Butler that Captain Turner had died. And why didn't he apply for the job? And so he did. And then he found out that Captain Turner wasn't dead. So he had to write a letter of apology to Captain Turner. But he said he did. He did pass away later on, and he did apply. But yeah, you're right. He did do all those schools at one time. Yeah. You know, Mr. Ellis was at Lanier.
Yes.
And Bobby Collins was Colonel Butler's assistant, and Bobby and Mr. Ellis kind of swapped jobs. Bobby
Okay.
and Mr. Ellis came to, but I know Mr. Ellis, you know, he was very soft spoken. I never heard him raise his voice, but he could get the point across to you. I remember Ed Jones talking about taking, I think he was taking trombone lessons from Mr. Ellis, and he went in one day and he hadn't practiced, and he started playing what he was assigned, and you know, he kept missing it, kept missing all this, and he said finally Mr. Ellis got up and walked out. He said, I thought he was going to get some water or go to the restroom or something, but he never came back. He said, finally, I got up and went and started to look for him. And they had a little repair shop around the corner there. And he said, as he passed by that room, Mr. Ellis was in there working on a clarinet. So he said, I got the message. If you're not going to practice, I'm not going to listen. That's just the way he was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was just great. Both of them were just, you know, they were just great people. And I learned so much from them. You know, and my teaching over the years, whatever I was rehearsing, I always stopped to think, how would Colonel Butler do this? You know, how would he do this? And it always made a lot of difference in the way that things turned out for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You were around some great people. And you know, so many of these things, these stories intertwine. When my first teaching job was in Montgomery at Goodwin Junior High, which
Right.
fed into Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis and Bobby Collins. I mean, he came by the band room so many times. Very soft spoken, so helpful. Just an amazing person. And Tom Borden's children were in my band.
Oh, really?
And yes. And at that time, Tom had gone into accounting.
Right.
And yeah, I would have him come out and rehearse the band. And, kids loved him. He loved the kids. Just a beautiful, beautiful situation. So many of these names just keep coming up in these different Hall of Fame interviews.
Yeah.
That we all kind of learn from each other. And
yeah, you know, Mr. Ellis, speaking of Mr. Ellis, you know, he was the one that came up with the 7 essentials of tone production.
oh,
And young directors, if I could give them one bit of advice, teach the 7 essentials of tone production. And because, you know, Colonel Butler always said, there's no substitute for a beautiful quality sound.
there you go.
And, you know, I do a lot of judging. I'm sure you do too. And you hear bands that are prepared technically, but you can tell they haven't worked on the tone quality. And that's so important, you know, because that's where it all starts is having a good sound.
And if you get that part right, everything else becomes easier. Articulation's easier, techniques. It's almost like the horn plays itself. If you get the tone. Yeah, and I remember as a beginner, we had to memorize the 7 essentials of tone production. So that, you know, that lived on well past Mr. Ellis's teaching days. Yes.
And Mr. Ellis started that pass-off system too.
Hmm?
You know, sometimes at Selma, I could do pass offs. So kids could come in during the day, but a lot of places you can't do that because of the scheduling. But it really helps if you can do that.
Yes. Again, thinking back to my own as a beginner, we did pass offs, and that was at the time that another Hall of Fame member, Dee Dee Black,
Mhm.
was at the State Department, and
Yeah.
he was really put as the state instrumental music supervisor, and he really pushed the pass off system statewide. And so even as a beginner, I'm sitting there looking at the first division band method and the Rubank elementary method. And as a beginner, I really, there's night and day as far as which is going to benefit me. So yeah, we were doing our pass offs from the Rubank book, and being able to play in pretty much any key. It didn't matter,
Right.
whatever key was fine. If B was flat, that was fine. If B was natural, that was fine. Just no problem. And that pass offs, that's what made me a player. And I always did the pass offs as a director. Time consuming. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But if you can find the time, it's worth it.
Yeah. Anything, if it's 10 minutes, it'll help. If you see the kid for 10 minutes, just put a little pressure on them. They know they've got to practice and come play it for you. It'll sure help.
Yeah.
Something else I was going to mention about, especially young directors starting out. Uh, you know, I always tell them, find somebody that's that's really been successful year after year after year, and go and watch them. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
what they do, how they do things, the things that they say. Now I had the advantage of having Don Jackson there with me every day, and I watched him. And it was a new lesson every day because he was just such a great
Mhm.
teacher. Uh, but I'd watch him every day, and I would find myself saying the same things that he said,
Mhm.
doing the same things he said he did. But if a young teacher can find somebody like that, go and watch them, and they'll say, "Well, I don't want to bother people." They won't be bothered. They'll be flattered.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you wanted to go and watch somebody teach, look who you picked. You're the smartest guy ever, as far as they're concerned. Yeah, I did the same thing. There was, several directors as a young director, very successful junior high directors in the Atlanta area,
Right. Mhm.
over in Clayton County. And a couple of times a year, just take the day off, take the old personal leave days to go. And, yeah, take your
Sure.
personal leave days to go and go to somebody else's band room and
Yeah.
just steal ideas right and left. It makes all the difference because they were doing the same thing. None of us invented any of this. We're just learning from other people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You make it easy on yourself. Go watch somebody else and see how they did it. And do it that way.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
something else that I tell kids a lot of time, young kids, go to your professional conferences and go to clinics. If you get a chance to go to the Midwest, that's the greatest thing in the world. I got to go first time, I think about 1986. The Army Reserve Band paid for me to go, and it was an
Well,
eye-opening experience. The great
hmm.
clinics, the great bands you get to hear, and you walk around and you see people that you've seen their names on music before, and there they are. Like Paul Yoder and
Oh yeah, yeah.
all these guys. And
Yeah, and I,
just
I remember Claire Grunman had his own chair.
yeah,
Remember?
yeah,
He was
yeah.
like, "That is Claire Grunman's seat right up there. If you watch long enough, you'll see him come and he'll sit." But every concert, there it
Thing
was over there in the balcony.
was, yeah. And that's when I found out that Claire Grunman was a man.
Yeah.
But I played a lot of Claire Grunman music. I really liked it. But yeah, it's and you can just walk up to these people that you've always read about and just talk to them, pick
Oh
their
yeah,
brain.
personal, very personable people. You know,
And they're glad to help you.
yeah. James Swearingen, who said, I was a band director. I had bathroom duty. He had however many periods a day. His job was to sit outside the bathroom and make sure that no shenanigans were going on in there. So he took that time to sit there and compose.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy. I was playing one of his pieces one year, and I saw him there at the Barnhouse exhibit, and I went up to him and I told him I was playing one of his pieces, and I said, how would you do the slow section? He said, did you pay money for this music? And I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, do it like you want to. He said, you bought it, do it like you want to. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, just really nice guys. They really, really are. But and I also get on another subject, MPA that we do now.
Hmm.
Go and listen to bands. Used to we did that a lot, but I judged here in a district this year, and I bet I didn't see 3 directors come and sit and just listen to bands after their band played. But you can learn a lot. I'd go and sit and listen for a day, and a lot of times I'd find music I wanted to play. But you don't see that a whole lot anymore. Of course, sometimes it may be hard to get out of school an extra day, but that's something that I think they need to do. And also, I tell young people, and this comes mainly from judging, a lot of times they'll make the same mistakes over and over and over again in their program. And I'm wondering, did they not hear this? And I've always said the worst place to listen to a band is on the podium, because you don't hear things you don't hear some things on there if you get away from it or if you record it. I always recorded a rehearsal maybe once a week, and I would sit down with my scores, and I'd hear things on that recording that I didn't hear on the podium. So that's something that I recommend young directors do.
Absolutely. Yeah. You better check your ego. When you do, because what you told, oh, boy, that sounds great. And you listen to the tape and you go, oh my goodness. I said that was good. How did I miss this? I didn't. And again, going back to my first job there at Goodwin, we have a very, very small band room, and 50 kids would be wall to wall to wall. And I'd heard an old Truman Welch trick, to just go outside, close the door, listen to the band through the wall.
Yeah.
So I tried that. Just went out in the hall, closed the door, and I tell you, whatever the band sounded like in that hallway is what that band would sound like on stage. I would hear upper woodwind things, offensive upper woodwind things, and percussion balance things in the hall that I was not hearing standing in front of them in that little bitty band room.
Right.
It sounded good in that hall. It sounded good on stage.
Right. When I was over at Briarwood with Jim Knight, I would go out in the hall and listen to the band. And I'd tell Jim, I said, Jim, the band sounds a whole lot better out in the hall. But you're right. That's exactly right. That's the way it really sounded. So, but you need to record it or get somebody else to come in and listen, or if you can, you get in the gym or something in the auditorium, get away from it and listen to it, because you're going to hear different things.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Trying to think of anything else that we have not covered.
Yeah, because there's so many of these things that the little things that make a big difference. Yeah, I know for me, you mentioned Bobby Collins, and we talked about going in visiting other people. I remember the first time I went over to Clayton County and visiting a guy named by the name of Julian Creamer, who had just come back from his second trip to the Midwest. And, I didn't know him. I did not, had never met him. He didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. I called him on the phone. I said, we have Veterans Day off here in Alabama, and I know y'all are still in school. I would love to just come and watch you teach. And not only did he say, sure, that's fine. He said, that's a long drive for you to make in the morning. Why don't you come over the afternoon after school the day before and spend the night here with me and my family, which I did. And, at that time I did some things well, but the thing I did the worst was teach rhythm. I just didn't have a good concept of teaching rhythm. One day with Julian Creamer, I knew exactly what I was going to do the next day. It went from being worst to first overnight. And it was pat your foot and count. And people say, well, Frank, you didn't know about pat your foot and count. I said, well, yeah, I knew about that, but I didn't realize that was all there was to it. You just had to do it consistently. So the next day, then Bobby Collins came over a couple of days later. He said, if you're going to be a counting band, the Eastman system's kind of the Cadillac. So he taught me the Eastman system that we then used from there on out. But nothing I was coming up with on my own. It was all taking ideas from these other people who were masters.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about hearing wrong things in the music. I used to get Joe Barry Mullins to come up before we went to state contest. He was at South Alabama at that time, just 100 miles down the road.
Yeah.
I'd get him to come up every year and rehearse the band before we went to state contest. And he told me that he always, whatever he wanted to play, he had this big table and he put all the parts out on that table. And he took the score and he compared the score to every part. He said, you will be amazed at how many wrong things will be on the parts that are not on the score. So that's very time consuming, but it would save a lot of wrong notes when you start playing. Yeah. But he was a master at it too. I mean, he could just transform a band in one rehearsal. And my kids absolutely loved him too. He got to be a really good friend. And, both of his band director sons live here in Birmingham now.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, I see Thad play a lot of jobs with him. He's a percussionist, just like his dad was.
That's amazing. Well, John, we have covered so much. Anything else that you can think of that you'd like to add? We could kind of tell war stories all day, and I would love every minute of it.
Well, I think we've about covered it. I kind of went over in my mind this morning things that I wanted to talk about, and you've asked me every one of them, so we were on the same wavelength there. So I think we've about covered it all, my friend.
Yeah, perfect. I think the people that listen to this interview are going to come away better directors than they were beforehand, and get in there and enjoy the journey.
Well, one thing to end it, don't ever stop learning. Always keep learning, because there's always somebody out there that has a different idea from you that'll work. So, don't ever stop.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note to stop on. John, again, thanks so much. And thanks to the people who are listening to this and the other Phi Beta Mu Legacy Project interviews. This has been Frank Buck and John Bradley.